The term web refers to the World Wide Web, which is different from the Internet. The Internet is a global communications network, whereas the web is one of many technologies that use the Internet to distribute data. Files that make up a web page that you and I see as we're on the Internet are stored on a server somewhere in the Internet. When a user wants to visit a web address or clicks a link to open a web page, a request is sent to that server to send the web page files that are stored there. The proper request is made because the web address, like google.com, is matched up with an IP address or series of numbers that identify the physical location of that device on the Internet. There's a large database called the Domain Name System, or DNS, that keeps track of all the web addresses and the IP addresses that are associated with it. It's much easier to remember the domain google.com instead of typing in a long series of IP address numbers. So as a website is created, not only do you need to find a place on a server for your files called hosting, but you also register a domain name like mycompany.com with the DNS that is unique to your server IP location. So when users visit your site, the files are retrieved from the right location. The files that are retrieved will be interpreted and rendered on the user's computer by a browser like Chrome or Edge, and the user will then be able to see and interact with the website or web application. There can be multiple pages, directories, or folders associated with your domain. Each domain usually has a website, and each website has a home page that's the starting page if you go to that domain like google.com. It will automatically open up the home page. Home pages are usually called index.html. All systems will automatically look for an index.html file for any domain, unless you configure the server differently. Google.com is the same as google.com/index.html. Let's break down the web address or URL a bit. At the beginning of a URL is the HTTP or HTTPS. HTTP refers to the protocol or rules for transferring the web data across the Internet. It stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. If there's an S at the end, it means that encryption is being used in the request and responses, and it's much more secure. The :/ is the syntax that follows the protocol, and sometimes you'll also see the www following it. The next section is the second level domain, and the end part of the domain is the top level domain, or the .com, .org, .gov, etc. A domain, which is the second level and top level together, must be unique from any other domain. There are 3 types of files that make up most websites: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML, or Hypertext Markup Language, gives the web page structure. In the HTML code, tags are used to tell the browser how to render or interpret each part of the page. A tag like H1 around the main title of the page tells the browser that this is your heading with the highest level of 1. An A tag tells the browser to see the text home as a link. There are many different tags to differentiate the different parts of your web page and to lay out the structure of that page. An IMG tag has everything it needs to show the image in the 1 tag. The purpose of this markup language is to lay the foundation of the page and what it contains and how it is organized. But to make the page look a certain way, you use CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's a style sheet language used for describing the presentation of a document that is written in HTML. It's how we make the pages look good. It takes what we set up with HTML and makes it look much better. Ideally, the CSS code should be in a separate file ending in .css and linked to the HTML file, but you will also sometimes see CSS embedded or in line in an HTML file. If you keep the CSS in a separate file, that same file can be linked with other HTML files that need a similar look on your website. The CSS file is made up of rules that pertain to different parts of your HTML page. For example, in this code, the selector is nav A, or the part of the page you want to be affected. The curly braces are the declaration block that contain one or more declarations. Each declaration has a property name and a value. In this rule, the A tag, or link tag in the navigation is having its font changed, some padding or space around them is added, the text color is changed to a dark blue represented by a hexadecimal, and the default underlining decoration is taken off. In addition to making content look a certain way, CSS is also used to lay out the page or place elements of the page where you want them. The last type of file associated with web pages are JavaScript files. JavaScript is a scripting programming language commonly used on the front end with web pages. It is the most widely used programming language with web development. JavaScript adds interactivity to web projects like prompts, manipulating HTML and CSS, animations, data validation, and much more. This helps engage the user and improves user experience. JavaScript has programming capabilities the same as other languages. However, the code is not compiled or assembled like other programming languages, it's interpreted. This happens when the end user retrieves the website or web application on their computer. The user's browser will process the code once it's retrieved. This reduces the burden on the server and loads the website or web application more efficiently. These three types of web files, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, work together. CSS is linked to HTML, and the JavaScript file is connected with a script tag to the HTML. Other files like images, audio, and video are also included in web projects and must be stored on the server as well. Good file management skills are needed to organize all of these web files and reference the related files to each other using the proper pathways in code so the files can work together properly. You may have heard of other frameworks or libraries that you can use while creating web applications. The purpose of frameworks is to simplify the process of creating a website. Some examples are React, Angular, and jQuery. Frameworks are not necessary and therefore not necessarily as important to learn compared to the web trifecta of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It can be helpful to learn those three really well before using any extra web frameworks or libraries. Different companies and developers prefer different frameworks or may not use them at all. Some CSS helps include Sass, which is an extension of CSS, or SCSS, which is a superset of CSS. Other languages like PHP can also be used with web projects to handle back-end or server-end processing, for example, to help your front-end to work with a database back-end. There are server runtime environments that can also help with back-end, like Node.js, which will allow you to execute JavaScript code outside of the web browser. Some developers use what is called a CMS or content management system to create websites. CMSs are software applications that allow users to build and manage a website without having to code it from scratch. They're often used by those with little coding or technical web knowledge. They offer numerous plugins or modules that handle tasks so the developer wouldn't have to code them. Popular examples include WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal based on PHP, and Django based on Python. There are also tools that are valuable to help with creating and debugging web code, like development tools that come with the browser that lets you inspect and render HTML and monitor your web pages. Another helpful tool is a good code editor, where you type the code. The editor can give coding helps and shortcuts. A commonly used editor is Visual Studio Code, but an editor is not necessary for writing HTML, CSS, or JavaScript because code can be created in any simple text editor, but a good editor is very helpful and recommended. It's important to understand that HTML, CSS, and JavaScript go way beyond just making websites. There are a lot of easy-to-use, out-of-the-box website creators out there. With HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can create computer systems or applications to run entire company systems interfacing with databases or complex applications like games or even creating mobile apps. Instead of an application that is created that stands alone like you'd see with a language like the C languages or Python, an application made with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript can run very similarly but use a web browser as the entry point to the application. People are already familiar with the web, and creating web applications is a way to connect with your user. Web applications are very common, and this type of application development is growing rapidly in the industry. So there we have an overview of the web and the code and technologies that are used with it.